Hello and welcome to the first event in our Farm Green programme. Farm Green is about inspiring sustainable farming, and we hope through this programme to help you, our producers, find some of the solutions we need to collectively drive our agenda on sustainable farming. In today's world where sustainability is key, a number of our customers are setting targets. We are setting targets as a business, and we need to work together to make sure that we have a viable, sustainable future for everybody. Sustainability is not a new topic. Sustainability has been something that's been talked about for many years, whether it be through individual subjects such as antibiotics, animal feed, animal welfare. They all contribute to ensuring we have a sustainable future. But what we do find today is that there is a lot of confusion and a lot of noise around the whole topic. And it's getting harder and harder to know exactly where we should or shouldn't do and go with a lot of the challenges that we have. As a business, Dunbia have set science-based targets. We have our own agenda to try and improve our own factory operations environmentally, looking at water, biodiversity, and energy usage. But you, our suppliers, are a key part of our supply chain. And we need to work together to make sure that everything we do is fit for the future. Our customers are becoming more and more in tune with what we produce. They're asking more and more questions, and it is no longer possible just to say we do a good job. We have to demonstrate it and prove it. So through Farm Green, we hope to bring you a number of topics that will hopefully help and inspire everybody to become a little bit more sustainable. And sustainability isn't hard. It's about doing the simple things well, improving our own efficiency, whether it be at farm level, in terms of genetics, in terms of animal health and welfare, or through our own factory operations in terms of water use and energy use. We can all play our part in trying to solve the bigger challenge of climate change. We hear a lot of news about climate change, and it's very, very real. Looking at global challenges, the UN Food Systems Summit, there's a lot of people talking about this, and we need to show some action. And collectively, Dunbia are working with the European Roundtable of Beef Sustainability. We're working with the UK Cattle Sustainability Platform to try and navigate our way through some of these challenges. But we hope this series will be really inspiring for you as our producers to showcase what can be done and how actually simple some of this stuff is. So for today's webinar, we're talking about the importance of farm data, and we're delighted to be joined by Ian Wheal from Breedr, who will hopefully give us some insight into how simple and easy data can be on farm. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce...
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited to share some of the things that we've been working on, but also I think some of the opportunities that when I founded Breedr, they're for all farmers, whether it's working with Breedr or not working with Breedr. There's a lot of opportunities for farmers to make the most of the data they're already collecting. And I think what's exciting for me is that there is a lot of data, and it's actually becoming more that farmers are already collecting on farm. And actually that burden's only going to become more with all of the targets that are going. And you know, we founded Breedr originally with sort of two main aims to help farmers with. One is, you know, how do we make all of this data collection on farm easy? And with that, actually get some productivity information and something that drives your own business back. Too many times in the past, you have to do your movement records, but there's not really anything in that that's not just red tape. And actually, you do need to be able to then use some of that to be able to build productivity. The other big thing when we're founding Breedr is actually that the passion for seeing my parents and the ridicule that everyone in the industry was getting about we should just stop eating beef. Now, we don't see that as a solution. Actually, you know, how do we help and how do we work with the industry to prove we're doing a good job? How do we prove that we're the most environmentally efficient? How do we prove what we're doing? And so it was those sort of, one of them being a passion project, like how do we give farmers the tools to actually prove they're doing a good job? The other one being just like, let's make people's lives simpler. There's technology out there. Let's make your life simple. Let's make the most of what you're doing. And so that was sort of why we founded Breedr. Next slide, if that's all right. So probably skip over this one, but one of the things that we did notice from a Breedr perspective is there's a lot of things that are also then driving change on the top of that in the industry. So as we're saying, these were challenges before. The environmental one was a big one, but there's a lot of things that are now coming through. So new traceability systems are coming in. Globally, there's requirements for traceability for livestock to know where they've come from. And again, these requirements are only becoming stronger. And farmers in the UK will know that with the new livestock identification program coming in. That's adding more regulation. AHDB's now got a medicine hub to have more understanding of what's happening in medicines. There's a lot of things that are coming through that are actually driving bigger traceability. On top of that, pretty much every farmer who's listening to this will have had a smartphone in their pocket for at least 5 years. Not all, but pretty much all of them have had a smartphone. And you're using it for Facebook, you're using it to WhatsApp your children or your cousins or your family. Like, that technology adoption that has changed dramatically has now put a computer in the pocket of every farmer. And if you can introduce me to a farmer that loves sitting in front of a desktop computer in their office, I'd love to meet them. We're now in a world where actually this technology is accessible in the environment that farmers want to use it, which is on the farm, outside, when they're actually doing an action. And then the other two ones is, these are, I hate to say it, the challenges that we've really got to face up to an industry over the next while. The basic payment scheme is changing. It is changing in a way that will mean that farmers have to change how they run their farms. They will find their income coming from other sources. They will have to evidence other things on their farm to be able to get any sort of government support through ELMs and other sort of programs that are happening behind that. So that's going to mean that we have to know our bottom line even better than we've known it now. You can't rely on a BPS check to come through once a year to be able to pay for the farm. And then finally, net zero. Sarah's already talked about that. And this is something that's coming. We've obviously got agricultural targets. It's around 60% reduction that the government's expecting out of livestock over the next 20 years. And that stuff that's really is going to drive an impact. We've seen some of the supermarkets already setting net zero targets much earlier than that. And that's been driven then from the top down. So I think all of these things mean that, it's going to be partly exciting, partly challenging, but there's going to be one thing is for sure, there's going to be a lot of change in the next 10 years. And I think how we support farmers and the livestock industry to adapt to that is critical. So next slide of that. So here's a few sort of things which are coming through. So we obviously have the red tractor. We're already seeing red tractor standards changing. As we would have called it on our farm, this is more red tape that's coming through just to cause more trouble. But the reality is this is what the consumer wants. And this is what DEFRA and the government and everyone else is pushing towards, is higher and higher standards. But this is also, from a British agriculture perspective, our differentiator. So it's important that we do this. It helps differentiate us on a global stage. Then we've got the livestock identification system, I believe due to come out now next year, that goes through. But again, we're moving to EID. There's going to be changes within this. There's going to be new ways we have to submit data. And over time, there'll be extensions into medicines and other things that have to go through that sector. But it's also an opportunity. It's trying to join up better data on the supply chain. It's trying to get better feedback back to you as a farmer to actually try and change it. And then on top of that, we've got a whole new lot of reporting, which we don't even know what it will be yet, around ELMs, which means that what you thought you had to do to get a BPS check is going to be completely different. So you're going to, as a farming network, in fact, all of us as farmers are going to have to prove out what we're doing to actually show that we deserve this check. And so that's important. So we just skip on. So, but one of the big things I think we all believe at Breedr and everyone in the supply chain is that this sustainability, like the environment, is very important. Lots of factors around sustainability are important, but it has to start with commercial sustainability on farm. And you can do that with a lot of the data you have now. So next slide. So, how can technology help you address these? Well, firstly, you can save time. You don't have to spend as much time at your desk. So the whole point of this is when you're capturing data out on farm with mobile technology, and again, not just Breedr, but any mobile technology, means that you can capture data on the go, so you don't have to spend hours in front of the desk doing stuff. I'm sure no farmers ever fill in their medicine records today before they do their red tractor, but that sort of stuff is stuff that is like, you've got to fill out a pen and paper form. It takes a long time. If you can capture it at the time that you're dosing that animal, you basically have half an hour before red tractor comes around and you're all good and off you go. And it saves a huge amount of time. It can even save you time in the action of doing it because you're not having to write stuff down. So at Breedr, you're able to do things like scan the medicine bottle. So all of the data you actually need for the supply chain, you haven't had to type in a single bit. And even that is faster than writing. In fact, the motto at Breedr quite often, and should be for all technologies, is unless we're saving time versus pen and paper, no farmer's ever going to use it. So let's not even do it at that point. The next bit is actually, with saving time, you can also improve productivity. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then I think one of the big things that Sarah touched on before is we are going to have to see increased collaboration along the supply chain. It's no longer an excuse for the person who's given birth to that farm, be it a dairy farm or a suckler farm, not to know what happened to that animal to be able to improve their breeding for the next year. To be able to have an improved breeding cycle of 10 years is just too slow. We have to be able to act quicker on genetics and everything that's happening. And from a farmer perspective, this gives you an opportunity to increase your profits. If you know what's happening on your farm, then you are able to change what you're doing, and you're able to improve what's happening from a bottom line. And hopefully with that, that might be a fact of you don't have to spend as much time doing admin. It might, so you don't need as much overhead. It might be the fact that you've got better genetics, so you've got better feed conversion, like all of these things. Or you might be delivering stuff in spec all the time to Dunbia or whoever your processor is, to be able to actually make sure you don't get discounted for something that's out of spec. So, you know, a lot of these things can all be done by data, and can support you in making that decision. Next one. So this is just a quick example of what we've done with Breedr. And just before you push play, you know, in the past, a lot of this data is already being captured on farm. So you already have an ear tag within that animal. You're already quite often weighing these animals which come on, but quite often you have to then take that unit back to the house, download it onto Excel, download it onto a PC. The number of farmers I've been to that's got 1 million records of weight sitting on a weigh head that they've never actually done any analysis on is unbelievable. But you know, you have this data. This is not about getting more data, it's about making your life simple. So this is just an example of one of the things that we've done with Breedr about how do you link it up so it's useful to a farmer there and then. So if we just play the video, you can see.
Crush mode is the easiest way to get data into your phone in the livestock industry. What will happen is, as the animal steps in, the weigh head will look for a steady weight. Once it has that, it sends it straight over to Breedr, and then we're able to then search the ID for the animal. If they had an EID tag, we could scan the EID tag and it will populate the record, or we could search for a visual ID or passport number as well.
Great, thank you. So you can see from that that this is data that you're already capturing, but now what we're doing through mobile technology is we're directly linking that to every other bit of data. So in that case, it was EID, which is actually linked to the BCMS records, which obviously the app does all of the movements if you want it to, or it can just sync up with BCMS. So you have all of those records in one spot, and then very simply, as the animal comes through, you're collecting weight data. And why is this important? Well, if we actually look at the data everyone's already collecting on farms, if you just take your BCMS records or Scott Moves or APHIS, wherever you are in the country, and you combine that with weights, you already have the daily live weight gain for each individual animal. You have that most of the people have put sire on their passport. You then can actually look at the progeny of various sires. So you can see which sires are producing offspring that grow faster. And you can see birth farm performance. So you can actually use the holding number on the BCMS record to see which farm that is growing faster and which one it came from. And then finally, you can look at animals that are underperforming. So as the animal comes through, it pops up to say, what's the daily live weight gain? The other big metric we use is change in daily live weight gain, because if the animal's decreasing in weight, you need to know, is it ill? Is it ready for market? Is it starting to put on fat? And so actually from a conditioning perspective, it's ready to send to processing. So all of those things come from just linking up what you have today with BCMS and weights. And it's very simple. And I suppose that's so important because weight gain on a farm is essentially revenue you are getting. It's that simple. So if you see weight gain as your revenue with times by a price, you've effectively, that's your revenue per day. It's so important for farmers to understand that and make it easy. And you can see that's what we're trying to do there. After that, there's a lot of other KPIs you can get through very little data input. So actually doing your movements, you can start to see source farm, you can see mortality, you can see antibiotic usage when you link it with the red tractor stuff. So you can see which farms are doing better in terms of animals that are performing. So there's a lot of metrics around that. We also do quite a bit with breeding, and we actually have a dashboard that auto generates the AHDB breeding KPIs. And this is simply by logging your bulls into the field, by logging PD tests, and then logging your burst, which you have to do for a regulatory, all through the app, and then combining that with weights. And these are sort of very, very simple data points you have to do. And then I think the last bit there is actually working with your processor. They already have, and Dunbia, I know, feeds this back to absolutely everyone, your carcass information. So you have this carcass information. It often sits on a piece of paper on your desk at best sometimes, but there are a lot of people have it in CSVs and they have to manipulate it into Excel. But just by combining that together, you can start to see carcass performance, which animals are producing the best kill out percentages, which is a big driver of profitability on farms. So, all of this data exists. It's just how you view it. And I think that's what at Breedr we're trying to do, is like not just build something that helps you save time, but actually give you feedback with the data you already have, and then be able to collaborate better with the supply chain to be able to prove you're doing a great job, because that at the end of the day is how we build good relationships. So next slide. And so this is the last bit of a pitch around Breedr. Like what we have within Breedr is livestock management. You can do your farm assurance and red tractor. We've actually just launched a benchmarking tool. So actually for farmers in Breedr, they can start to benchmark anonymously against other farmers like them. So they can learn where they can be better. They can learn at what areas they can improve. And then with that, you can trade with data, and you can also, I think what we're quite excited, which we've also just launched, is if you're measuring the weight of that animal, you can prove that animal's increasing in value. So we're now actually able to work with partners to release cash flow for that animal. So you can actually start to use that data to help free up cash on your farm. So that's Breedr. But yeah, thank you very much, Sarah, for having me. And any questions from anyone, I'm more than happy to take them now or offline later.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. And it's really exciting to see where Breedr has come from and going to over these last few years. So I think I know there's a few questions coming in, but before we get to that, I think there's a couple of things that just to highlight from what you said there, that this data topic doesn't have to be scary. This data topic isn't something new and novel that farmers do, as you alluded to in that slide from last, sorry. They have a lot of data points. Actually, the key is using them and interpreting them and making them work on your individual farms, because it's very easy to collate data for the accountant or for another purpose like red tractor, for example. But actually interrogating that data can give you a huge amount of insights. And I mean, you talked about the analysis of data and the financial benefits from daily live weight gain, for example. But actually the carbon story that goes with that too, because the biggest win that we have in this whole carbon debate is actually efficient growing animals. So weight for age, reducing days to slaughter, all that has a really positive impact. But like we said at the start of this, some of the challenge is actually knowing where that data is, how to use that data, and then how to collectively tell the story. Because it is no longer good enough, as I said before, to just say we're good at these things. So I think there's a huge amount of information that you've shared there, Ian, and it's I think hopefully giving some people an insight into actually this topic doesn't have to be scary. That smartphone that's in the pocket that is doing a huge amount of stuff for us already, I think can be used really, really well going forward. So we've got Claire Windram, who's in the Dunbia Ag team too, who's been looking at some of the questions coming in. Claire, what have you got to throw at Ian and myself from this?
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, Ian, for the presentation. It was very interesting. We have a few practical and industry questions here. I think we'll start with the first one, which is who owns the data? So I think we'll open it to both Sarah and Ian, if you want to start there, Sarah.
I suppose the actual farm data I'm going to pass to Ian, but when it comes to collaborating in industry data, we do have to fit with the GDPR rules. There's government controls of what we have, but actually a lot of this data isn't going to be attributed to individual farms. This is not about saying one farm is better than the other. when I'm talking about data in supply chain, it's anonymous amalgamated data sets that we need to strengthen our argument. And that's the key. When we're asking for data going forward, it isn't a negative ask, it's of trying to turn this into a positive. But I think Ian can answer the question from purely a farm level.
Yeah. So from a breeder T's and C's, the farmer owns the data, right? They put the data in, it's your data, you put it up. It's not to say that, you know, a carcass sheep that comes back, obviously Dunbia owned that and they gave it to you. And so then, you know, there's a joint ownership of that data that you've got to be able to work with. But when it comes to the actual data in breeder, the farmer owns it. What we want to do though, is then make it really easy for you working with either your suppliers, so a calf rearer you may be working with, or a dairy farm you may be working with, or a processor you may be working with, to feed back to them or to share with them to be able to improve that collaboration. And so in the system, you can actually sign up to supplier groups or set up your own supplier groups so that you can share that data much easier across the network. And I think, you know, it comes back to, this is about the industry that we've got to be able to do. And so, yes, you own the data. It's your choice whether you share it. But, you know, from an industry perspective, we have to work together to be able to prove out what we're doing. And I think Sarah highlights that point as well.
Perfect. Well, sticking on the data side of things, with the industry asking for so much more from our farming base, are we not going to see quite a lot of duplication then, coming from the data perspective?
I think that is a very real risk, and one of the reasons that we are trying to work collaboratively with a number of organisations, and Ian highlighted the Livestock Information Partnership and Red Tractor, etc. We should be, from an industry point of view, working with those groups and others out there to try and collate this data. But ultimately, there are going to be times where specific supply chains for specific customers want to know very clear answers to very clear questions. And it might be a case that a farmer is asked the same question twice by two different people. That, unfortunately, we're not going to get around easily. But what we are trying to do is, where possible, make that as streamlined as we possibly can. And say, I can't emphasize the word collaboration enough going forward. And I know Ian will agree with me on this, that collaboration is something that we are going to have to become more and more open to. We're working with a number of other processors and customers and industry organisations through the likes of the UK Cattle Sustainability Platform to try and address some of these issues, and farmers equally are going to have to collaborate more so than they do today. And I think that's going to be a fundamental change that everyone has to adapt to, but we're trying to avoid duplication where possible.
Yeah.
Ian, I don't know whether you've got anything to add on that one.
Yeah, right. I mean, just a couple of examples, like, you know, if you're putting in your medicine data, it's useful for Red Tractor. It's also useful for some of the supply chains that are out there. And what we're trying to do is we do that reporting. So actually, we've now built an export for the medicine hub from AHDB. It's the same stuff as you need for Red Tractor, but it's just everyone wants it slightly differently. So we can take some of that pain away. I think also technology companies have a lot to answer for on this. Like, how are we working with a carbon toolkit or carbon tool, or, you know, there's lots of them out there, but how do we make sure that there's not duplication between them? Like, how are we making sure that, you know, if you've got another system that might be related to arable on your farm, that we're actually integrating with? So a lot of our focus now moving forward, we've got a great core product, but it is how do we integrate, and what are the systems we need to integrate with? So as a farmer, you don't have to enter duplicate data. And I think I've worked in other technology industries and they're much better at that. We need to be much better at that in agricultural technology as well.
That's great, thank you. There's quite a few concerns coming through in the chat box around finding the time to input the data. Ian, could you just explain a little bit about possibly how long it takes for the farmer to input data such as what you've explained?
Yeah, well, I suppose our motto is we try and make it faster than pen and paper. So, you know, if you are out there and you're collecting pen and paper, you know, back to sort of who's adopting it, like our oldest farmer using Breedr on a daily basis is 96. So anyone can do this, and, you know, he is our pin-up poster boy, but at the same time, like, anyone can do this. So, but in terms of like actually how easy it is to start adopting. Like, we are lucky in the UK where you can connect up your BCMS system or your Scott Move system, and actually you haven't had to enter any of that data. It just automatically syncs with Breedr. Then you can weigh your animals, and you could do this with lots of other livestock management platforms. So, you know, you can then weigh them, and then it automatically comes in against that animal. So, and once we get EID, which is coming with the Livestock Information Service, then that will become easier again. In fact, it will be easier to operate like that. It will be better for the animals because we've got less time in the crush. Your animals will grow faster. I'd have to say, like, this is all about ease. And the good technology companies are going to be the ones that make your life simpler and mean you can spend more time with your family, not the ones that make your life harder. And if they are making your life harder, look for another technology company. I think that's the whole point of technology. It's supposed to make your life easier.
That's great. And there's quite a few farmers actually coming through to say that they already have a weigh cell on their crush. So for the likes of Breedr, how do they start to link that data up to the app? What devices are compatible? You know, are there any holdbacks, anything?
Yeah, so I mean, we're not compatible with everything. We have had one farmer ask us whether his spring-loaded one could connect to the app, but you know that it needs to have Bluetooth. So it needs to have a Bluetooth connectivity. We're working with a lot of the True Test devices, which are pretty dominant out on the farm, and we've now connected up with lots of different stick readers as well as the Gallagher devices. So just get in touch with us. I think the exciting thing is you can now buy a weigh head for less than 400 pounds. It used to be that it was 2-3 grand for you to have to go out and buy a weigh head. For less than 400 pounds, you can have a weigh head that connects to your phone. So, you know, the excuse is no longer there as much of how expensive it is. And there's also lots of productivity grants that come around at the end of every year. So if you are wanting to spend on something more expensive, do get involved in those. The government's really supporting productivity, and that helps farmers get into weighing.
It's great. Thank you. I think that's all of our main questions. My only other one I was going to maybe ask Ian was around farmers already having the data. How would you advise, Ian, for farmers to make that jump into moving into more?
Yeah, so I mean, whatever tool you choose to go with from a farmer perspective, then, you know, think about it in terms of trying it first. Like, there's a lot you can do just to test it and try it. If you've got a lot of data, it's probably on Excel spreadsheets. It could be in another farm management system. And, you know, it is there, but, you know, at least give it a shot first and see if it works for you, because not every tool will be right for everyone. If you've got that, then, you know, I know from our perspective, we've got an amazing support team. I think a lot of people think they're buying Gabby, who's our support manager, not Breedr, half the time, because she's so good. And we can help you over the phone, get set up, you know, and get all of that data in that you have. And actually what's exciting about that, if you have data, is you can get some of these insights instantly. Like, you upload that data, you know, a few hours later, we run all the analytics on it, and you can immediately start to see the insights coming through. You don't have to wait 12 months if you've already got data on your farm.
That's brilliant, and thank you everybody for the questions. But I think data can be scary, technology can be scary, but hopefully in this last half hour or so, you've had your fears allayed somewhat, that it's not quite as bad as it professes to be sometimes. And I think as part of our farm green journey, our next step in this whole debate is going to be around KPIs. As Ian said, the Breedr tool can do KPIs for you, but actually there are industry tools out there, and we will be having AHDB talk about their KPI Express tool with us in the next session that we have, because once you've got data, it's how you use it that's important, and then what information you can glean back from that, and will hopefully help everyone become more sustainable on this journey. So without further ado, thank you very much, Ian, for your time. It's been really great to have you with us. It's great to launch this first webinar of Farm Green. I'm very excited about this program that's coming out. So all that's left to say is look out for #FarmGreen over the coming months. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.